And we're back. Good evening. It's early evening here. We have a special guest. Yes, we don't often use the special guest. Been wanting to get Aylo on for a while, and he finally plucked up the courage. I think he crumbled to my insistent demanding that he come and chat to us. And he's definitely one of us. He's out there on Twitter. He's got a newsletter. Aylo, welcome, dude. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thanks for taking the time. And yeah, man, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Very, very happy to be here. Sorry it's taken me so long. I'm not sure I have a particular excuse apart from maybe during the bull run I was head down, very busy. Now there's a bit more time to reflect and think. So yeah, very happy to be here with you today. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, I mean, like I said to you at the beginning, it's like I don't have, I think everyone knows this. We don't sit down and plan our chats. It's just kind of like whatever happens, and like I just wanted to just get some insight into who you are and what brought you into the space. So let's just kick it off. I mean, yeah, how did you get into the crypto universe, and what's been your motivation?
Sure. I think probably quite a familiar story for maybe for some people that were aware of crypto, maybe in the early 2010s. I was definitely aware of Bitcoin, and I think I probably tried to buy some drugs on the dark net.
Yes, please.
and that was that's what I thought the purpose of Bitcoin was back then.
Yes.
I did not have the financial education to come to any other conclusions at that point. And I think early 2017, I came around again to crypto. I think maybe my brother put a few things in front of my eyes, specifically Ethereum, and I dug in hard, went down the rabbit hole, did the 2017 run, like a few people, so had way too many wins very quickly, and thought I was a superstar. Got brought down to earth pretty quickly, 2018, but maybe unlike some, I stuck around for the tech. I was always interested in the tech, and I think a lot of people they make fun of in it for the tech crowd, but for me it was the tech that allowed me to stick with the space, even though naturally, like most people, I started off attempting to make some money. So I stuck around in 2018. I was the only thing that you could do back then was read white papers. I mean, there was nothing else of real substance. There was no applications, nothing like what we've got today, really. Yeah, I'd say the thing that really tweaked my interest in the space, that led me to get involved in, say, a more dedicated way, because I was buying coins like people, I was investing, but I hadn't really found like my niche at that time. I wasn't really a Bitcoiner. I kind of liked Ethereum, but again, there wasn't a huge amount you could do on Ethereum, and I wasn't a developer as such. I have some technical background, but I wasn't a developer. And it was Chainlink. So I got sent the Chainlink white paper at the end of 2018. It had already had an ICO by then, and it was the thing that made me go, wow, so blockchains can actually be so much more than just this version that I've seen right now. I mean, we can bring all this outside real world data into the blockchain environment, and this Oracle thing sounds like it's going to be a big deal. So yeah, I enlisted in the Link Marines for for a couple of years, I think, but I came out of the bear market with my net worth well intact as a result, and that led me into DeFi summer. So I'd say I'm like a product of DeFi summer. I think that's where I've completely fell for DeFi. I was just obsessed with everything that was coming out. I mean, it was the start of liquidity mining, and suddenly being able to borrow against your collateral in a way that seemed a lot. Well, I say it seemed safe, but if you remember Curves UI back then, 1inches UI, I mean, the UI was absolutely terrifying. But yeah, did DeFi summer, and if I fast forward a bit further to where I'm at now, about a year ago, I figured I'd amassed. I took it for granted, the kind of knowledge that I'd amassed. I just thought everybody knew what I knew, and and then obviously I realized it was probably just an echo chamber of the same few thousand people talking over and over to each other at that point. And figured I'd put some of it down on paper because I was doing so much research and writing, and I had my own kind of squad of people that were sort of participating in the bull run with me. And yeah, some people seem to quite like reading some of the stuff I've written, which is great. And I had no plans for it to go anywhere really. And yeah, seems like now that there's a solid number of subscribers and that read the newsletter, and I feel like a bit of a burden of responsibility to do something with it. But yeah, I'm up to all sorts of things right now. I'm doing a bit of advising for different projects, and doing a little bit of angel investing for the first time, which I think goes hand in hand maybe with also the exposure as well that maybe we can give certain projects, through the newsletter. And yeah, I having a good time actually in the bear market right now. I feel relaxed after being ridiculously burnt out a few months ago.
It's incredible. It's incredible how your story mirrors so much of what it is that I went through, and I know a lot of the crew and the tribe that are a part of this DeFi subculture. It very much is a subculture. It is very much a different insight into this prospective future, beyond the casinos and the Ponzi's and all that stuff. There really is a similar journey that's been traveled by so many, but the difference here is that and I'd like to obviously get into the different aspects that you've presented, because you've given some fantastic clues on topics that we can chat about. Being the consummate storyteller that you are, it's great to be able to reflect on what it is that you said. Just for the listeners who don't know, Aylo runs a very successful newsletter, which it primarily looks at alpha and the concept of what alpha is, and we can get into that as well. What is the definition of alpha? But we'll get to that just now. And what he does is that, like I said, and I wasn't joking when I said that he is one of us, and what I meant by that is that what you're doing is that you're taking all this incredible and vast knowledge that's out there, and you are putting it in a way that is presentable, understandable, and very easy to read. And when you finish reading your content, the result is that you don't feel like it's been this burden or this journey, because a lot of the stuff that's out there, you read it and you feel like, oh my God, like this was just too much. And whereas you'll take what could potentially be too much and you turn it into something that's enjoyable and understandable. And most importantly, it's something that I can then go and talk about, which is it's what we do. It's what you do. And therefore you definitely are one of us from that perspective. And, I think the ability to do that is in itself a gift, but clearly you've done the mileage, you've traveled the road of having read all this documentation, and you know exactly what is needed and how to present it. So, just kind of looking at the current place that you're at with, your career essentially in the DeFi space and in crypto, because let's face it, you have carved your own niche and your own career in the space. Are you constantly striving to take this thing to the next level? I'm sure you are, but to what extent are you pushing that boundary? Like, do you want to have, like, is your goal, do you sit and wonder, I wish I had 200,000 followers or 500,000 followers with, all this income that might come from advertising or whatever the case is, or advisory or whatever it might be? What are your immediate goals, your medium-term goals, and your long-term goals in this journey that you're on at the moment?
I think when I came into the space, just being quite honest, at that point in time, I was looking for direction. I was looking for a change in in kind of my personal circumstances, which I guess your personal circumstances are always related to, your financial health. I think people maybe find things at different moments, and maybe it's always, it's the right moment for you. I always think this about crypto, actually. I always think, oh God, why didn't I come across the, dive in, in 2013? But I actually think, you have to be in the right place, in your life to accept certain ideas. And I think when I came into crypto, I think there was definitely something that made sense very, very quickly. And I saw it as from a philosophical point of view, from a technological point of view, and from a financial point of view, that you had this combination of things that were combining in a way that I'd never seen before, and I'd never been particularly interested in finance at all, and had been interested in tech, but not really particularly interested in finance. And I didn't come from a background where, financial literacy or education was kind of like handed to me. So I started off as, the short-term goal was always, can I improve my family's circumstances, my circumstances, through potentially this new technology and investing in this new asset class. And I think that, that has kind of remained that's still obviously a long-term goal, that I want to remain exposed to this asset class. And I think the majority of my personal net worth is still wrapped up in crypto. It comes in and out dependent on the sort of market conditions, but I think sticking around, in the space, you will end up being rewarded because, once you have that conviction, you feel like, right, well, I kind of know where this is going. So that's definitely my long-term plan. Is still, I want to be exposed to this asset class, and I think it's going to be profitable for my family and for myself. The kind of medium-term goals, I suppose, with my writing, and let's say like now where I'm taking my career, it's very important to me that I think when I write something, it's authentic, and that hopefully I'm not saying I'm going to get everything right. Absolutely not going to get everything right. And I shouldn't be getting everything right, because I should be challenging, all the ideas that I have. But I, want to be able to hold my head up high and say, if someone read something there, maybe it helped them. So I would always prioritize my personal integrity over, sort of how many followers I put on. And I know there's certain ways and methods to supercharge that kind of growth if I wanted to, but it's yeah, I'm very happy growing something organically where people, I have my self-respect, and maybe people think I'm helping in some way. So with Alpha Please, I'm definitely going to continue writing. I think I pride myself really on being consistent. My goal with it is really to be consistent, and I think when you do something consistently and you show up to work, you put the hard yards in, I think eventually you're rewarded. I've yet to see an example of where that doesn't pay off in life. It might be slower than you want, but I think if you're consistently putting hard work in, you tend to reap the rewards over the long term. And then if I can, I think, find the right project, I would be more than happy to take a more dedicated role. I am kind of in conversation with a few different protocols about potentially helping in a more dedicated role. But yeah, I'm kind of excited just to see where crypto goes in the next few years as well. I have a lot of doors that are open now as a result of I think just, as I said, just being consistent. I don't really think there's a better way to describe it, really, if that makes sense.
You're once again reflecting what's happened and what is happening with us, at Blockmates as well. We share very much the same story that you do, and I think the journey is very the same in terms of, from Grant's perspective. I think he holds the same priorities and values, around, the principles of organic growth, around, maintaining the integrity. And, I think from a Blockmates perspective, what's really important about what it is that we're doing is that we're doing it with honesty, like it's kind of, I know it sounds cliched and it sounds cheesy, but I think at the end of the day, it's got to be from a place of, if we are working with a project and, we're putting information out there on behalf of that project, and, we start telling essentially lies around what that project is about, we're essentially sacrificing our entire business. We're saying that, we're more interested in getting a whole lot of money, and we don't actually care about this thing that we're busy building and the community that we are essentially responsible to. Because, the thing is, like it or not, you are, like you say, like you feel responsible to sit and write the content, be consistent. You do it because you see the love, but there are those moments where you like, man, I've got to do another interview, and it's like, and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And it's like, sure, I'm tired, but you know what? You do it because, frankly, we love it. I can hear it. You love doing this. Would you rather be doing anything else than what it is that you're doing right now?
No, I just think clearly same for you guys, for a lot of different people in the space, people that I've spoken to. They said they've kind of found where they want to go in their career, or there's a kind of a certainty about a subject matter that you're very interested in, and it definitely can be very rewarding at moments. Of course, I think it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster at the same time. There's the space is moving so quickly, especially. I feel like it's moving maybe as quickly as it ever has moved, despite us being in a bear market currently. So Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to do anything else. I don't think. I think this is me for a while. Maybe let's say see the maturity of blockchain and crypto, and hopefully, over the next 5 to 10 years, the technology fulfills a lot of the promise that we all think it has.
Let's assume that you haven't made it in the space, and you did make it. You invested in a number of projects during this bear market, and you landed up getting an advisory role where you were given an opportunity to take a position in something. Next bull market comes, and you essentially make yourself that number that just does it for you. You know that everyone has a number in their minds. You hit it, and you're one of those people that knows that that's going to be sufficient for you. You make it. Do you carry on doing what it is that you're doing right now, or do you call it for a while and go travel or do whatever it is and then come back to it? Or do you just call it and say it was a good run, I'm now going to go and do something else and I'm going to enjoy my life? What route do you think you would take if you were presented with that opportunity of making it?
Well, I mean, I've had a slight indication of maybe about how I would feel. I wouldn't say, compared to maybe some people in the space. I mean, that whole make it number. I think that's a debatable thing in itself. Whether a number can truly define, this idea that you have achieved everything you could possibly achieve in life. And I know it's maybe not interpreted like that, but that's kind of how sometimes it's described by people. You hit this number and then that's it. You've completed life, and
No. I don't. Let's just be very clear. What I meant, let's be very clear on the definition that I would like to work with in this discussion is as follows. Making it merely means the amount of money that you feel would be sufficient for you to explore the possibility of being free of, like having to pay bills and having to worry about that kind of stuff, where you then truly have the opportunity to go and make it in other ways, where you have all that time to focus on whether you carry on doing what it is that you're doing right now, or whether you decide that you want to become, a philanthropist or a traveler or a surfer or whatever it might be. What is that? Yeah, I mean, if you were presented with that number that allows you to then have the ability, essentially, the definition for me is that making it means that you have sufficient money to go and do what it is that you want to do without having to worry about the aspect of money. That's what I mean.
Sure. So for me, the purpose of, making it really would be in order to improve my material happiness, right? To be as happy as possible. And personally, I think happiness is found in purpose. And I think what that particular number allows you to go and do is spend more time seeking out that purpose. And if you've already found that purpose, then you have got more time to put towards that particular purpose. So and I think everyone's personalities are kind of different when it comes to what they in their head they ideally imagine they would do if they were financially free. My personality, I would never stop working in some way, because I feel like I would always want to be working towards something. I'm not saying that's necessarily sitting at the laptop and feverishly writing and reading, and maybe it is that, but for me, that number would just allow me to sort of focus on even more focus on kind of finding my purpose. Although right now I would say I feel very purposeful, and as I said, that is honestly where I believe happiness is found really for human beings.
So my interpretation of your response with, I hope, a little bit of insight, is that you would probably continue doing what it is that you are doing. You just wouldn't be as dedicated, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't do it as well. You might land up doing less of it, but I don't think that you would actually stop doing it. That's my feeling around it. Let's see, in the next bull market, if you do make that magic number, whether you will be able to answer that question in another stream that we do. I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, it's it's funny because midway through I don't know, maybe it was early 2021, and I don't know if this is a familiar feeling for people in the space. It probably is. I mean, if you sort of lived and breathed through a full cycle, and you were trying to find an edge, and you were constantly probing different parts of the crypto ecosystem that was popping up. I think maybe it's a familiar feeling, but I always felt I was massively underperforming, right? Constantly. I felt like I was slow to things, and not maybe not sizing things correctly, and I didn't see this particular narrative, or that. I always felt I was underperforming, and it's quite funny because at that particular moment in time, I'd never had more money. I wouldn't say I was like it was fuck you money, I would say fine, but it was a number for sure, portfolio wise, and where I was going to be fine for a very long time. So I was actually more unhappy at that moment than I am now.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think I, at that particular moment in time, still didn't know where I was heading. I didn't feel that purpose. I just saw a number, and it wasn't connected to anything. So, and that's why I think that realization there for me was, it's not going to be enough, probably just to have a number. I'm going to need more than that. I'm going to need, there's going to need to be something afterwards that feels really purposeful.
So I can confirm that it's you're not the only one that walked that path. In fact, I have a suspicion that I mean, just completely left field here, is I have a suspicion that it should actually be called the Jimi Hendrix syndrome, because Jimi Hendrix was never happy with the way that he played guitar. Like at the height of probably one of the most talented guitarists that ever walked the face of the planet, he was just not happy. And I think that's what happens, is that our human nature drives us into a place where we almost con ourselves that there's way more potential in whatever it is that we do or whatever it is that we seek. And we land up completely going wayward in terms of how we perceive our success. And I think you definitely shared that. I mean, I felt the same way. And it's crazy when I think about it, that, like the calls that I was making during this last bull market. I mean, obviously we are all geniuses, but I think some of us are more than others, and we just really get wired to what's going on in the space. And I mean, I was making calls that literally minted millionaires in this Discord group that I was in. It was actually ridiculous, and it was obviously very enjoyable at the time, but then you kind of reflect upon it after the fact, like in the short term, and you're like, but I could have done so much better. I could have like really extracted so much more value. And then you start second guessing yourself, and then having the same conversations that you were also having, and it's actually really silly. And I think, that is a perfect opportunity for me to ask you the most obvious question to ask at this juncture, is that in light of the fact that you have been essentially, now you are in your second and a half, you're halfway through, or towards, we're hoping towards the end of your second cycle. The bear follows the bull that was. You went through the bear before with the bull. And what were the lessons that you think, just off the top of your head, that you learned from 2018, 2019, and I'm sure you've written about this, that you've now taken with you? And what extra lessons have you learned over this last cycle and where we are right now that maybe you didn't pick up on the first one. So just go with the question around lessons. What were the lessons that you learned from these 2 cycles?
Sure. I think the most important lesson that I've really internalized, and we've seen some spectacular people fail and blow up in the space over the course of the last 6 months. The number one most important thing that I will always stick to, and it's a lesson that now I think I've learned, and luckily I've maybe not learnt it the hard way where some people probably had to start from zero again. Never be forced to give up, right? Because once you're forced to give up, you're out of the game. So I think survival, especially in crypto, where there are so many different ways that you can blow up, whether it's intentional or, through poor security, for example. That for me is the number one that I survive. I always make sure I survive. And that when I hold that kind of close to, that lesson close at all times, it means that the way I operate is almost like with a kind of split personality. So I have certain investing principles or actions that I take that I know mean that I won't be forced to give up. But then this space, you are allowed to experiment. You are allowed to try things. You are allowed to jump into things without, knowing what they do quickly. If you can see, there's a big, risk versus reward there. So number one lesson for sure was just make sure you survive. And I've seen countless stories online on Twitter. 3AC is now the most famous, right? They blew up. They blew up in a way that was, very hard to start again. The way they blew up as well. I mean, if you're able to earn an income, you can always start again. If you can't earn an income again, you can't start again. So, I'm not saying, I'm sure they will come back in some way behind the scenes, but as public people, it'll be quite difficult.
I don't think they will ever be public again. I believe that they would. I just don't see it. I think there's just, from a reputational point of view, there's no ways.
You're probably right. The second lesson, definitely, and this will resonate for sure with many people through the cycles, is you will never make any money in this space really if you can't control your greed. At certain points, I mean, it's got to be the most powerful human emotion that exists, or it feels like it is anyway. Again, everybody's a genius in a bull run. Can you control that greed and take that profit and be patient? And if you can do that, you will be fine. For a lot of people, that is very difficult. Even for some close friends, that I had in my life, I witnessed them make extraordinary amounts of money, and they were just completely unable to control their greed. So I'd say that one's quite important, especially if we are going to have more speculative manias. There will be more bubbles. Right now, people are very scared. We have a terrible macroeconomic backdrop. But the period of greed will return. And it's just very important, I think, that you always remember, control your greed.
I think the taking profits rule is probably the single most important rule that you can never stop learning, because there's always that moment. I can always make just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. And that's when you get into those narratives and those repetitive voices in your head, then you know you're going down a very bad road. Just know that, because we've all been there. We know what it's like. We all know what it's like to be riding along and to be like ridiculously up and thinking, no, but I can go further. Bro, what are you thinking? Like, you've made an obscene amount of money. Close the frickin' thing and walk away and go and pour yourself a beer or a cup of tea or a whiskey or whatever it is that you're going to pour to celebrate the fact that you actually did that. But we don't. We get stuck in this whole idea that why not push it a little bit harder? Why not push it a little bit further? And that is the trap that you speak about. And I've been there so many times. And for me, that's probably the single most important lesson that I constantly need to be reminding myself to do, because it's such a rush, man. You know, that's one of the most incredible, like that's where the addiction comes from. That's where the degeneracy is born, is that inability to draw the line in the sand and say, enough, I've done it. I've done enough here. There'll be another one. And then I'll do the same again, and I'll draw the line again, and then I'll practice it. And that's what I've been doing. And it's been very helpful from that perspective.
Yeah, one of the ways to definitely control, control your profit taking, it is to have some sort of system. It is to write down plans and be very disciplined in the way that you execute those plans. That probably goes on to maybe another lesson, that you really need to understand the time frames that you're whenever you make an investment or a trade. And I think this is also something that people argue about constantly on online on Twitter. You can both be right potentially, but you might be talking about different timeframes. And so understanding when you enter into a trade or an investment, you need to know what your time frame is potentially for that investment. Is it a short-term trade? Fine. But is it something long-term? For example, are you putting, like right now, this is a moment for me with certain assets that I understand I'm taking a multi-year time frame. When I purchase spot. Now, at the same time, when, for example, Lunar Classic ran up recently, I very rarely take short-term trades because it's not my skill set. I'm not the best. But there has to be a certain number of criteria that almost are satisfied for me to take a short-term trade. And, I understood very well, right, this is going to be something that is a very short-term trade, and that's what I'm entering into. So I think, that's a good lesson, that whenever you enter into anything, understand the time frame, and you have to write it down. I keep a log of what you're doing, because it's also very easy to press some buttons on the internet and get carried away.
Yeah, well, any successful trader keeps a log. It's part and parcel. And if you're not running one, then and you are successful, then start running one, and you'll be even more successful. It's just the nature of it, because that is your way of holding yourself accountable post the trade. Why did I make a losing trade? And it's really important to be doing that. It's not good enough to have the numbers on a spreadsheet. You need to have the intention of why you're doing it, and to take those profits. If you are taking 3% profits per day on your trades, then you must take the 3%. Put your stops in, take the profits, and if it rides longer, great. That's part of your plan. But it needs to be a part of your plan. Don't make it up as you go along. I mean, that is super important. I'm not a great trader. I've always relied on, like the aspect of spot and making good calls on the new projects. One of the reasons why I wanted to do stuff in Blockmates was, and I'm sure you do too, to a certain extent, is to get insight into projects early and to get an opportunity to invest in those projects long before anyone's even thought of investing in them. And I'm seeing that a lot right now. I mean, it's actually insane. I'm seeing more potential in the market right now of up and coming projects that are even like 80% of the ones that I'm choosing are probably going to land up doing extremely well in the next bull run. Really, I mean, that is how innovative the space has become right now. I'm seeing a tremendous amount of really cool stuff that's coming to the fore, that's relevant, that's sustainable, that really is going to make crypto a very interesting place in the next run up. And the next question that I have is, what are your perspectives and your perceptions around what happened in 2017, 18, and 19 versus what happened in the last cycle? What are the narratives that you saw beyond just the IPO versus the Ponzi's? What were the nuances that you noticed in 2017, 2018, 19 versus 2020 and 2021 going into 22?
I think in 2017, I mean, really the mania was fueled by ICOs. I think sometimes, I mean, I'd love to see a study on it. How many ICOs just completely rugged and didn't even bother attempting to build something, and at what point they decided to give up. But there were a lot of white papers. There were a lot of ideas that never got built out. I think 2017 there was obviously a lot of promise around Ethereum, but the narrative, I mean, I seem to remember then again was Ethereum being a Bitcoin killer. It was very primitive in terms of the narrative. It wasn't. I didn't think it was very well thought through. I mean, every single smart contract platform wasn't really understood, and they were all getting a bid. And then you had the kind of the Bitcoin forks. There were. I mean, now if you look at the money that was involved with the Bitcoin forks, it's just staggering. And they've all pretty much, well, they're not gone to zero, but they're zombie chains essentially.
Yeah.
Really, I'll be honest, like I didn't see much. I think, look, Bitcoin had went true. Well, I think it went kind of mainstream in 2017 at least. It definitely was not mainstream in 2016, and it had a moment where the media suddenly were talking about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was a huge narrative, and Ethereum as a potential Bitcoin killer was a narrative. And then the rest, there was just ICO mania. And honestly, I don't remember anything where I went, oh my God, that's going to be amazing. It was just, this is better technology than that technology. And it was, not really well defined. I certainly don't remember DeFi being kind of a popular term. I don't think I saw that term anywhere. And then
definitely wasn't. Absolutely not.
2018, 2019, it was silent. I mean, really, like, it was just, if you were maybe a bit on Twitter, and there was a few forums around, and I remember just trying to follow a few different projects. And one of the reasons that Chainlink in particular was very helpful for me was Chainlink is like they work with everyone. So, if you were following Chainlink, you were being exposed to other potential projects that were going to use Chainlink oracles. And then you were kind of able to discover, oh, these guys are the guys that are actually building something. There's actually something real happening here. And 2020, I mean, it was kind of simmering, maybe DeFi again. I was aware of it, but didn't really know if it was going to be successful or not. It felt like it had the best chance of being successful of any kind of category that was going to be, programmed onto a blockchain. And yeah, DeFi was huge in 2020. I think that was like a massive watershed moment for crypto, for sure, because you could suddenly do stuff, right? It was it was useful, and so
Yeah.
DeFi was huge. And I think DeFi, we're going to just stick with that category for a second. DeFi going into 2023, 24. I think we've learned a huge amount about how to build, kind of like robust systems. Now we have, like, let's say the base blocks, the base primitives in place, and I think the next few years now with DeFi is about expanding that kind of capital efficiency, because I think DeFi in some ways is not that capital efficient in certain areas. So becoming more capital efficient allows more money to sort of move around the system, and I think building out those more advanced, like TradFi, whether it's derivatives or options, allowing there to be more sophisticated hedging and trading that happens on chain, I think is going to be huge for DeFi, and it's going to bring in more advanced traders and institutions. And yeah, I honestly just see DeFi is in like a really good place, and it survived, right? It survived this year. So definitely bullish on DeFi going forward still.
Yeah, I think we really are lucky to have experienced DeFi, and I think from an opportunity perspective, once again, coming back to the quality and the innovation of projects that I'm seeing at the moment, it's a hell of a space to be in at the moment. It's like really, it's evolved. I think it's probably evolved more in the last 12 months than it has in its prior 2 to 3 years. I really mean that. It's astounding what guys are coming up with. Forex trading on chain, stable coin swaps beyond the US dollar. Networks are being built for traders and developers to come in and build stuff on top of it. And, communication protocols that extend ecosystems and chains beyond just, chain link and, bridges. And, we've got layer 0 coming out and stamping its authority in the space. Well, it's out already, but, people are starting to use it. And there's just so much that's going on at the moment that you'd have to be living in a cave somewhere with a big boulder rolled in front of it to not be excited about what's going on and the prospects that the space has to bring. I mean, you wrote an amazing thread, your recent thread. I can't believe I don't have it in front of me now. But you wrote about Arbitrum, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a recent piece just looking at where the layer 2s were, and Arbitrum. I wrote a little piece on Arbitrum and just looking at some of the the on-chain data and what kind of adoption has happened there.
It's popping, man. Yeah, it's popping. It's like really, it's on fire right now. Grant did a piece on like all the projects that were happening a while ago, and just it really is, and I think it really does set up. As we know, crypto's got narratives, and those narratives, they either last for a day or they last and build up over a period of a few months. And I think that Arbitrum particularly is in a very good place. What are your thoughts around this airdrop that's been spoken about? I know that the whole airdrop thing is just infinitely freaking irritating. It's because it's mostly a scam, but I think the Arbitrum one probably and more than likely won't be. What are your thoughts around that airdrop that's incoming?
I'd be surprised if any recent activity, I'm talking maybe in the last few weeks, would material impact the Arbitrum airdrop in kind of any way. I would suspect that they will have taken various different snapshots already. I mean, if you look at the history of the Arbitrum team and the way that they've conducted themselves, I really think they're one of the most impressive teams in the space in terms of how they've executed. I would be surprised if it was any different when it comes to their airdrop. I think the Arbitrum token, when it does come, I I think it could end up doing quite well for the long run. They've had the benefit of maybe looking at how Optimism managed their distribution initially, and the kind of incentive program that they set up, which is also slightly different, and in that they allowed their kind of citizen house. You could sort of delegate responsibility to people. So they, yeah, I think there is. I mean, look, I think there is going to be an airdrop. I think every layer 2 is going to have a token, but I would suspect that a lot of snapshots have happened already, and I would hope that
are we going to get rewarded for our degeneracy in Arbitrum last year? Is that what you're saying, sir? Please say that that's what's going to happen.
well, I hope. I think I commented earlier that purely from an organic point of view, outside of Ethereum, Arbitrum is the chain I've used the most. So
yeah, me too.
I'd like to be rewarded as a loyal on-chain user, but we'll just have to see. As I said, I trust that they'll have thought about this, meticulously, and because when you design your the tokenomics and the distribution badly, it just has an enormous effect on then the success of your project. So they'll be fully aware of that, and they've got the lessons now of also a full cycle to digest, and I think that can't be underestimated, just in terms of every category going forward. We have all the lessons that we learned from DeFi, and all those exploits, all those bugs, they're understood. Even a category, if we want to, I don't know, maybe talk about another category that I think is going to be huge and makes so much sense for crypto and onboarding millions and millions of more users, is gaming. Gaming over the last year and a half, again, all sorts of experiments happened, and I think anybody developing a game right now that's utilizing NFTs or a token will have learned the lessons from this last cycle, and I'm absolutely convinced that as soon as somebody gets the in-game economy piece right, because I think there are all sorts of gaming studios around the world that can build good games. The difficult thing so far, and from a blockchain perspective, has been intertwining, the kind of token economy with a good game, and we haven't seen it yet. We've seen experiments, we've seen attempts, and but I'm hopeful that we start to see a couple of games, maybe they're in development right now, go live, and there's a few candidates, but go live, and that could be a huge narrative over the next few years.
Yeah, I saw that you've written about it quite a bit. Like it's a topic that you've obviously spent quite a lot of time looking into. And I mean, from my perspective, I believe that, as always, gaming has always been that, it's kind of like the one aspect in our cultural makeup, if you can kind of deem it that way, that pushes the boundaries, and if there's anything that's going to bring the mass adoption of blockchain technology faster, I think it's going to be through gaming. It's two things, right? It's gaming and it's finance, and the desire for people to look for those financial opportunities, and obviously going into the next bull run. My narrative perspective, as the big picture around it, is that it's sustainable projects that reward users that are willing to take custody, do their research, and use complete products that essentially we always used outside of DeFi or the crypto space. But I think it will be primarily DeFi, and all those interesting things that I'm hoping the next cycle brings to us. And that's my next question: is what do you think you see happening in the next cycle, what do you think the predominant narratives will be? What do you think we should be looking out for? And in light of your long-term investments that you're doing right now, I mean, where's your headspace at with regards to the future of the space?
Yeah, it's really difficult in it, like in advance, obviously, to know which particular use case is going to be prominent, because there are a number of candidates. I think what you can see happening in real time currently is the scaling of blockchains. So let's say Ethereum through layer 2s, and in particular, zero knowledge rollups potentially offering scale like we've not seen before with general purpose rollups. And I was actually on a call a couple of days ago with some Mark from Aave, and we were talking about Starknet and just how a new version of Aave, a potentially a v4 could be built on Starknet because of the enhanced capabilities and efficiencies that Cairo, the programming language actually on Starknet, allows. In terms of the cost of computation basically goes to zero. So, you can unlock all sorts of new use cases through ZK rollups. So I think having applications that can basically use free computation, and what could happen with that is, I mean, it could be anything, all sorts of things could happen, but you could get some very interesting DeFi and more advanced DeFi applications. I think maybe if we're looking, I'd say how I'm positioning myself, I think there's still a few interesting alternatives to Ethereum that will survive and thrive. Although, I mean, I will say I think Ethereum at this point now, it seems now any layer 1 that's sort of appearing is no longer calling themselves an Ethereum killer. They're calling themselves now a Solana killer, or some other layer 1 alt layer 1 killer. So I think maybe Ethereum has sort of just moved into this kind of like the different place that it wasn't in maybe a few years ago, and that everybody's just like, no, Ethereum's not going anywhere, and we're kind of over that conversation. At least that's how it seems to me. I again could be wrong, but I think Solana's interesting, and I, as somebody that is very into Ethereum, the EVM layer 2s that had dismissed Solana previously, and I did write about this, and it did cause quite a bit of conversation. But I think Solana is going about things a slightly different way, and I think as an investor, it's quite interesting and maybe a way to manage your risk if you look at a different path to user adoption and scaling. So, it would be very interesting to see how their kind of mobile endeavors play out, because I think that's another frontier for crypto over the next few years. We've got to do mobile. We have to. We've done desktop now. We've onboarded some people, but the world is running on mobile, right? So, I think anyone that cracks that, and there's a number of challenges there because of Apple and Google, and that's where Solana are taking on a very difficult challenge there. But I think Solana just is an alternative bet, in my opinion, and I think Solana will do quite well over the next few years.
So I'm going to this conference, the Breakpoint conference in Lisbon, at the beginning of November. It's a Solana conference, and just been kind of getting an insight into the projects that are obviously building on Solana, and we actually sponsored by the Hero guys. I mean, they've been a part of my success and my trials and tribulations in DeFi, irrespective of the sponsorship. So it's kind of like they are like my second family in the space. And the point is that I'm getting insight into what's going on with Solana, and it's actually really impressive, despite the problems that Solana has seen, about it going down. And it's kind of like, everyone's favorite, point that they like to remind everyone about. But Solana, you have absolutely, I think we are going to be blown away by what it is that we're going to see from Solana into this next run, and the quality of the projects that we're going to see. And you hit the nail on the head. I think the demand for mobile adoption and presenting a product on a mobile device is absolutely critical to adoption and ease of use, and promoting all the good things that the DeFi environment should be promoting, and that's people using it and taking the custody and putting it to good use. Whether it's saving their money, whether it's shopping for stuff. One project that I think has done it really well are the Change Finance guys, and they are so underrated. But what they've done is that their primary objective is mobile. We're going to get the mobile thing right. We're not going to compromise around that, and that's what they've done. It's just remarkable. They've got liquidity across all chains. I think it's like $60 billion or something that they have access to, and you can basically buy a lot of the popular projects and the tokens on those projects across multiple chains. So they've really done it in the correct way, and I think that is definitely the future.
Yeah, and it is a challenge because it's a monopoly right now. Owned by mostly, well, I say mostly Apple, but I think Android has a bigger market share, but Apple seems to be the go-to phone still, operating system for the Western world, I think. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think people are building now. They are thinking about mobile because we know that we have to do that. And yeah, I know significantly prominent DeFi projects that are building mobile solutions, and maybe another huge use case and narrative. And again, I don't know if it's still going to take a long time for this, or it's too early, but I think as soon as we have scalable blockchains that can handle it, and maybe that looks like it's going to be possible in the next year, potentially, maybe a bit longer, is this social media potentially moving on chain is quite interesting, because that could bring, that can obviously disrupt a huge category there. And Lens protocol is something that Aave have pioneered, and new models of kind of creator ownership around their community and their content. And I think Web2 social is definitely broken. So I hope that continues to grow and to get more popular in over the next few years.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for us in the space is to constantly be obviously looking for those changes and for those. I mean, I think by default we already do, but at the end of the day, like it's all about the alpha, and that's, as I said, I was going to ask the question, and I know it's a simple question, what is alpha? But I don't necessarily think that the answer is that straightforward. So what do you think alpha is?
I mean, I've always just kind of seen alpha as anything that information that could give me an edge to beat, to beat the market, right? So, and the thing about especially in terms of crypto alpha, I think part of the reason that I love, crypto, there are so many different avenues you can go down, and there are so many different ways you can have alpha, and we've probably both found different niches that have worked for us. But for me, I'm constantly looking for anything that gives me an edge. So that could be information asymmetry. It can be things that are inefficiently priced, and there is a ton of inefficiency still in the space. So I think, there can be, well, it's rare probably that there's, if something is completely consensus, that it's going to be alpha. But yeah, for me, it's mostly information to gain an edge. That's how I see it.
Yeah. So even though the answer is seemingly an easy one, it's very difficult to, in my experience anyways. I mean, you wrote an extraordinarily good thread. In fact, I think it's probably one of your best ones around how and where to look for alpha. And it essentially, when you get into that thread, it just proves my point exactly, is that easy answer, very difficult to achieve, because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of this understanding that only comes with experience. It really is one of those things that you really do have to sweat it out, and it's kind of like the blood, sweat, and tears, that you need to go through in order to just figure things out. And the really cool thing about it is, and I think this is going to lead on to probably my last question for the session, is that you obviously arrive at a point in this journey, right? So there's you go out, you try and figure things out, you find what works for you, you find people that are reliable, and in terms of the information that they give and consistency and all that kind of stuff, you make these relationships. And then you arrive at a point, whether it's coming back to what it is that I asked early on, like, if you make it, what would you do? And it's a similar kind of question, in that, do you reach a certain point in this journey that is the crypto kind of thing, where you eventually land up advising, you eventually land up investing in projects that you are then directly involved? Do you believe that that's what happens to people like us? Like, who are so interested on so many levels and who write and interrogate? Do you think we land up becoming project founders and advisors? I mean, where do you think the road leads to, particularly you? Because I think your answer is going to be very similar to the way that I feel about this.
I think what I found now over the last 6 months, I think when you end up getting presented with opportunities, or people get in contact because they'd like your advice on certain things, or wondering if you might be able to help them, I feel like it becomes a natural next step, because people want to tap into that experience maybe that you might have in a particular topic, and if you're the type of person that feels that you want to share that experience, it feels like a natural next step, in terms of just whether you go and take a dedicated role at a team, or maybe you just function as an advisor, or look, for some people as well, and I'm not ruling this out for me either, you know, you could become a founder, and
Yeah.
take that experience and that knowledge that you've got and apply it maybe to an idea that you might have, or, you know, you spot that there is a particular need that's not being filled by the market, and you could see that it could do quite well. I wouldn't rule that out either, and I've had ideas. I've had my ideas myself there. So yeah, I think it depends on your personality, but as long as you're still, you feel fulfilled by the intellectual curiosity, and still want to participate, then I think you can choose any of those options, and I could choose any of those options, I think.
So it is ultimately it's almost like there is a glimpse into freedom, like real freedom, like personal choice. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And sure, I have responsibilities. Sure, I have a family to take care of, bills to pay, regardless of what it might be. Even, you know, even the really mundane stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that what resonates for me in terms of what it is that you're saying is that it really does come down to, I actually have freedom of choice here to do pretty much a whole lot of stuff. You know, maybe I don't have the freedom of choice to get in a rocket ship and go to the moon because I can't afford it. I'd like to do something like that, but I can't. But you know what? It's not a big deal. It's not really that important. But ultimately, you know, I'm using that as an example, by the way. I don't really want to go into space in a rocket ship. Is that you have that personal freedom to make the decision. And I think that is, for me, probably the most valuable thing that we could probably achieve in doing what it is that we're doing, whether it's in crypto. I think crypto just really does, or this space, blockchain and this technology really does, it accentuates and accelerates the possibility of being able to be in that position to make, you know, to have the freedom of choice. And clearly you've managed to find that. I mean, it's obvious in terms of, you know, what it is that you've spoken about today. And I have one last question. Apes or punks?
Punks.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, we love the apes. We love apes. We are apes, but yeah, punks. I'm also a punk guy. Why punks?
From an artistic, aesthetic point of view, I actually have always thought the Bored Apes look pretty horrible. But so I always thought I always just liked the, you know, the kind of 8-bit pixelated look of the punks, and they were really, you know, for me, historically, culturally, relevant when it comes to NFTs. Of course, Bored Apes, I think, you know, will be that, you know, going forward. But there's something about punks that I just, yeah, I just quite like them, and I would choose punks over Bored Apes. But I think maybe also there's been a lot of maybe like the punk, like there's not been as much that's happened with punks, right? In terms of like, you just own, you know, the collection just got kind of like released. There's not like all these. I mean, I know that you know, that might change in the future, but there's been so much that's happened with Bored Apes, and I just kind of like the simplicity of punks.
The thing is, I mean, from the Bored Apes perspective, I mean, if you minted and hold a Bored Ape, you pretty much got $500,000 given to you over the period. I mean, it really is. That's what it was, and it's just insane. But that's what it was. It doesn't really help the Bored Apes crew that they are pretty cringe, but they've done very well. But ultimately, I think from a cultural perspective, for me, in terms of what I deem to be, at the core, at the very soul of this whole crazy space that we're in. I think for me personally, I think that the punks definitely exhibit and reflect that whole narrative and that whole space way better than Apes too. I love the DJ and Apes. I mean, Blockmates, we're all about that DJ and Ape. I think they're amazing. I love them. I really do. I think that was a project on the Solana blockchain that really just hit a home run. And it would be a very, very close contest between punks and those apes if Bored Apes didn't happen for me, but for me, it's all about the punks. Yeah. And on that note, thank you very much, sir, for joining me today for DeFi just over an hour. We did an hour and 15 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you and to just to get your perspective on things out there and, where you're at. And we at Blockmates love your work and we look forward to your success, and we will be following your posts and your insights into things. And we do appreciate you in the space, and thanks for being on our show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. And all thanks for the kind words. Enjoy all the stuff you guys write as well, and everything you're kind of doing to push the space forward. You got a cool community. So yeah, hopefully we'll get a chance to speak again soon.
Cool, brother. Take it easy. Have a good evening.
Cheers, Jedi. Take care. Bye.
Artlist.io